The Sonic the Hedgehog movie. Woo! Nobody saw it making this much money, and that makes a lot of fans very happy. But it has also opened a very interesting debate that I have seen on YouTube and in other blogospheres, which the question is, hey, the the Sonic movie won because it listened to the fans, and a lot of people are positioning this argument as if that's a good thing. But is it really a good thing, or did it just happen to work out this way? So anyway, hey everyone, this is Kevin T. Rodriguez, film critic of iCritic.net, and first of all, good news. Good news for the Sonic movie. It is booming with a record $68 million opening. According to this, the 3-day domestic opening is going to be $57 million, and the projected 4-day growth, which because it's a holiday weekend, is going to be $68 million. The movie costs about $87 million to make, plus marketing. So let's just round out $200 million. But this is a great start. It also beat a record because previously 2019's Detective Pikachu boosted the top American debut for video game adaptation with a 3-day start of $54.3 million, not adjusted for inflation, of which there isn't much, I think. But anyway, so good news there. Also, I want to point out, just because I love this movie so much, but Parasite did really well. $5.5 million for 3 days. Not bad for a movie that is available widely to buy on digital and Blu-ray. But this is about Sonic, so, kudos to Parasite aside. This is a good movie. By the way, I saw this movie. I saw on Dolby Cinema on Saturday, and me and the wife loved it. She liked it a little bit more than me, which is typical. I give it 3 stars. Here's the thing. It's not a great movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it's fun. It is fun. I like the action. I like the humor. Sonic's design is definitely pleasing on the eyes. I liked how it became more about the video games as it went along. So, I overall enjoyed the movie. Now, some people, like the amazing Lucas, has pointed out that it's dumb, and it's like, he compared it to, like, Kung Fu Panda, by the way. Which is like, yeah, no, it's not as good as Kung Fu Panda. But it has more in common with, like, Alvin and the Chipmunks, Scooby-Doo, and the Smurfs. And compared to those movies, Sonic looks pretty good. But there's a topic that's been coming up since this movie came out, and the headlines of these record-breaking, for video game adaptation, box office records are coming in, where if you type in Sonic movie listen to fans, you see things like listening to fans matters. Sonic the Hedgehog box office from Odin's movie blog. And you have Clownfish TV. I love Neon and Geeky Sparkles, by the way. Sonic the Hedgehog makes bank at the box office. The fans won. You also see sites like The Quartering, Geeks and Gamers, and Matt Jarbo talking about the Sonic the Hedgehog redesign and saying how, yeah, it was a win because they listened to the fans and they made money. But that brings up an interesting question, I feel, because it's being portrayed right now by a lot of people like, hey, you listen to the fans and see what happens. But the thing is, I'm not entirely convinced that listening to fans is always the good or right thing to do. And I even wonder how much listening to fans really helped in this case. Because let's make no mistake, this is not a bad movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it's not a great movie either. It is a serviceable movie for 8-year-olds. I anticipate the sequel could be better, by the way. And I believe it would have been a serviceable movie even if Sonic had looked the way he did the first time. Granted, it might have taken away some of the comedy because there are scenes in this movie that are so wild and cartoony that I can't imagine a realistic design having the same effect. But that said, it's not like the script was severely changed. It's not like they reshot a lot of the movie. They just redesigned the character, and the character design worked. The movie was good because it was good, not because the design was fixed, although the design being what it was originally. Like, let's make no mistake. Where is it? Like this. Oh, I'm sorry. The second picture here looks a lot better than the first one. I agree with that. Oh, here's another one. Yeah, $3 Theater. Sonic races to $65 million because they listen to fans. But here's the thing. Fans are fickle. I do think in this case, because it was a very aesthetic choice, I think even the non-fans could look at this original Sonic design, and it looked awful. It just looked awful. They didn't like it. So changing the design was a good call. However, there are many situations where I don't think listening to fans should be should be thought about, and I think fans can sometimes be detrimental to the movie. For example, the Star Wars trilogy. Like this one's, I'm kind of fascinated that this isn't brought up more, because the new Star Wars trilogy, I believe, was ruined precisely because Disney was way too concerned with what the fans thought. Now, I know this is going to be a very unpopular opinion, but I'm going to lay out my case. Because The Force Awakens, they were making that movie because they wanted to prove that, hey, we can make Star Wars. We want to bring people back to Star Wars. We want to show that, hey, we can do Star Wars properly. And the complaint was, from fans at the time, hey, it's a good movie, but it's pretty much A New Hope remade. It's not any different. It's almost beat for beat the same movie. We want you to do something different next time. So Disney, listening to the fans, decided to make The Last Jedi. Last Jedi definitely went astray from the franchise's roots. In my opinion, to great effect. I love The Last Jedi. You don't have to like The Last Jedi for this argument to work, though. But a lot of fans hated it. A lot of fans hated this movie. I don't think the fans hating it is why Solo bombed. I think Solo bombed because nobody wanted to see a solo movie, a Han Solo movie, I should say, without Harrison Ford as the lead character. I think that had more to do with it than anything. But okay, you watch The Rise of Skywalker. Now, it's pretty clear that Disney is trying to course correct at this point. They are trying to appease the fans while working within the restrictions that they have. Now, I liked Rise of Skywalker. I think it was undoubtedly the weakest of the new trilogy. But you're watching it and you can definitely tell that there was some course correction going on. You know, the fact that they actually made Rey's parents somebody, or they made Rey come from like a lineage, if you will, of Palpatine, and they scaled back on certain characters being used. It was pretty much like they're trying to meet halfway, and so they let the fans direct The Rise of Skywalker, and a lot of fans were not as enthusiastic about it. Let's be honest. A lot of them didn't dislike it, but a lot of people were kind of like, it's okay. But that's a problem. I think with like the Star Wars trilogy, by the way, in this case, they should have made a trilogy that they wanted to make. They should have focused on telling a story, but instead, each movie is about reacting to the fans. The first movie, okay, we've got to make it as much like Star Wars. We've got to make sure fans feel like it's their Star Wars. And they did. But then Star Wars fans are like, oh, but it's too much like our comfort foods. Like, okay, so we're going to go in a different direction. And then fans hate it. They rebel against it. So then they're like, okay, we're going to come back in the middle. And it's like, okay, it works-ish, but it's not really finishing what you did in The Last Jedi. In fact, it's retconning a lot of things. And, it's kind of a weird trilogy. Also, fans get butthurt over designs all the time. I remember when the first images of Heath Ledger as the Joker showed up, fans hated Heath Ledger. But that's one of our best Joker performances. A lot of people did not think Michael Keaton should have been hired for Batman. But Michael Keaton's considered one of our best Batmans. Heck, while we're on the topic of Warner Brothers, Justice League was totally refilmed because reception to Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, all these things were received poorly, except for Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman was received very positively. So a lot of the reshoots for Justice League was to try to appease fans who were not happy with what they saw in those movies. And yet they still made a bad movie. They made a confusing movie, in fact, because elements that were being led up to in those previous movies did not get used, and it's a bizarre thing. So here's the thing. I do agree that this new Sonic design is undoubtedly better than the old one. Do I think it made it a significantly better movie? No, it probably made it a mildly better movie, because it's still a script for 8-year-olds, and that's what it was always going to be. I don't feel like listening to the fans and giving what they want always will work. And here's the thing. I think Sonic fans would have seen this movie even with the old design. I actually think had they kept the old design, it would have definitely done well, because people would have been so curious to see how bad this thing was going to be. And then they might have even been pleasantly surprised. I am glad they made the redesign because Sonic looks cute. He looks like himself. Although I will say he looks so cartoony now that it does raise the question, why didn't they just make it a cartoon? I think a cartoon, an animated Sonic movie would have been better in the long run. But I don't think we should necessarily be saying like, oh, the fans fix this. The fans don't always know what's going on. And granted, it could be pointed out that this has happened for a long time. One story is that Meet the Fockers with Ben Stiller and Robert De Niro was shown to test audiences. And test audiences hated it. Like, they didn't think it was funny, they didn't laugh, it scored low, so they reshot 40% of the movie to basically make it funnier. And by the way, Meet the Fockers is the best of those. What trilogy is it at this point? I think it's a trilogy at this point, yeah. So that was definitely the funniest, and that might have been for the best. I even remember going to a sneak preview of Get Smart with Steve Carell and Anne Hathaway. And originally, at least the cut that I saw, the president was a much more blatant George W. Bush spoof. Like, he would actually say things like, now look, if this was like a tornado where we knew exactly where it was heading and we could divert the problem, then that would be something different. Or they were in the concert hall and he looks at the Secret Service agent. He's like, so this is a Disney concert hall, right? So where's like all the cartoon characters in the Secret Service? And it's like, no, really, where are they? And it was so blatantly obvious. I remember writing the comments card, Bush isn't going to be president next year. I don't think these jokes are very funny. And they cut most of them. I'm not going to say they cut it just for me, but like they do testing like that. And that's a little different. That's like you're putting it in front of an audience and the audience is reacting. You can kind of change course depending on that audience reaction. But then what happens when the test audience is wrong? Like there is a famous story of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where the first test screening was with a bunch of teenagers out on date night, and almost the entire theater walked out after the first 5 minutes because they did not want to watch a cartoon. Like, you know, they were too cool for a cartoon movie, and Disney demanded that the movie have reshoots, and Robert Zemeckis said, no, it's perfect as it is, and that's a classic movie now. Should that audience, that teenage audience who is so fickle, be allowed to change Roger Rabbit? So, this is where I'm conflicted about this. Again, this is a little bit easier to defend. It's a design. The first Sonic design was awful. This new one is good, but frankly, the movie itself isn't that different. So I would argue, in this particular case, I'm glad they made this change, because aesthetically it's a lot more pleasing, and I'm sure it helped ease people in. And like, I mean, you look at this little screenshot where he's like, has like a little paddle ball. I'm curious to see what the original design would have looked like, because that's such a cartoony shot that I can't imagine a realistic looking rodent thing, whatever the heck they were going for, would work. But to start getting on this thing like, hey, you listen to the fans, that's why you succeeded, it's like, well, yeah, but there are situations where the studios have listened to the fans and it has not worked out. And there are situations where the studios want to listen to a test market audience, and that would have been disastrous, and it would have been our loss had the directors actually listened. So, look, I'm glad it was a good movie. I'm glad it wasn't terrible. And I'm looking forward to a sequel. And hey, you know what? Kudos to everyone involved in this. This is a good result. And I'm glad that Jeff Fowler, he thanked the fans on Twitter for making the movie a success. Hey, you know what, buddy? I'm happy to give it for you. Thank you for making a Sonic movie that I can watch on the big screen. I can take my nieces and nephews to it in a week and a half. And one that isn't terrible. Because considering I've seen a lot of movies like this. I've seen the Chipmunks. I've seen the Smurfs. I've seen the Yogi Bears. I've seen so many of these cartoon characters brought into a real-world setting that have been terrible, that Sonic looked very good in comparison. Now, if those movies didn't exist, and I was comparing it to Lion King, Kung Fu Panda, animated Lion King, not 2019 animated Lion King, or compared to something Pixar do, yeah, Sonic is still a kid's movie, ultimately. But it's a good kids movie. I don't feel like kids will be made any dumber having seen it. But I don't think we should get on this thing where it's like, oh, you listen to the fans and you're rewarded and you should always listen to the fans. No, the fans are stupid sometimes. Fans don't always know what they're talking about. And what would be a very interesting experiment, I don't know if they're actually going to do this, but on the Blu-ray or 4K, I would like to see a second version of this movie. I know that they animated a fair chunk of the movie with the old design. I'd like to see a work in progress edition that shows as much of the old design in the movie as possible. Because I would now, out of morbid curiosity, like to see how would this have worked had they stuck with the original design. I don't think it's going to be any better, but who knows? That would be very telling if it did work better. I think I'd like to see that, though. But anyway, what about any of you out there? Did you see the Sonic movie? Did you like it? Do you think the studio should listen to the fans more? Do you think less? Would you like to see the original Sonic model on the DVD/Blu-ray? I'd love to know. Comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe. And as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one.